Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're going to start because Ian's got a great story to tell, and there's a lot of it, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions as well. And we've got a very hard stop at 4:10 because we all need to shoot back up for the final session. So let's kick off, and welcome back to this third afternoon session. Our speaker here is Ian Parkes from Twinings, and you are all, I'm sure, well refreshed after that tea break, which was, I hope you all noticed, Twining teas. Those are the splendid Twining teas. And we've actually got a great case study. I'm a bit disappointed, actually. I've just learned that we're not showing the whole case study here today, which has got the bit with, where people boil and taste all the tea, and it shows you all that sort of stuff. But apparently that's going to be on our website later on, so we've got a cut-down version of it for this purpose. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to introduce Ian Parkes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to listen to what I've got to say. I'm Ian Parkes. I lead the UK supply chain for Twinings. And really, what I'm going to share with you today is really our journey that we've been on probably for about the last 2 years. And you're seeing the kind of little tooltip. It's about making it a great place to work. We've been through a business transformation program over the last couple of years, really to try and make Twinings feel like a great place to work. We're still early days. We've been into it 2 years. I think it will go for on and on and on. We've had a good start. The Great Place to Work Institute ranked us number 3 workplace in the UK this year, which is great. Top FMCG business in the UK. But there's still more to come. And I guess really what today's about is trying to link what we've done here with the use of Nimbus Control, which has been part of that program. So what I want to cover really, to give you a bit of background to the overall program that we've been going through. Obviously then go into a bit of detail for this audience to talk a little bit more about Nimbus Control and how we've used that, and really how we've launched it and gone through that program, because we're not finished yet in that project, but this is a bit of a change management overview really in terms of some of the work that we've done, and share some of those learnings, and then talk about kind of where we go next steps, and then hopefully there'll be a bit of time at the end for Q&A. For those of you who are not familiar with Twinings, and I hope that's not many, having sampled hopefully our products during today, but Twinings is predominantly a tea business, and we've been at the forefront of that for over 300 years, so we're one of the oldest operating businesses in the UK. Don't just do tea, as you can see, our portfolio there. We have a number of other brands, which far too many to list on there, but brands you may have heard of are Ovaltine and Options, and hot chocolate, but we're mostly known for our tea range. We're a global business. Less than 20% of the turnover is actually in the UK. So we operate in over 115 markets. And we're also part of ABF. So the businesses you will have heard of, like Silver Spoon, Jordan's Ryvita, Allied Bakeries, are all part of our business. But we're Twinings as a division of ABF. And we have the broadest range of products in the market. So we've got over 160 different blends that we produce just for the UK. And we've gone through significant growth over the last few years. And I guess really the bottom two are kind of indicators in terms of the complexity and the growth of the business of why we've got into this need for trying to sort out our processes, because we've grown faster than we can keep up in the back office, efficiency-wise. A little bit of background on the Great Place to Work thing. 2 years ago, we felt, from an organisational performance point of view, we needed to do something different. We weren't really getting the traction and the business results as well that we were looking forward to. So we restructured the business and really refocused and simplified the agenda that we were working on. That had a lot of organisational changes, but with it came a change management program that we launched in the overall business that we deemed Great Place to Work as a bit of a label. Really was about trying to make Twinings a much better place to work. And actually the association with the Great Place to Work Institute came a bit later as one of the kind of the measures, how are we going to achieve this? How can we get an external benchmark around this? And that's really when the Great Place to Work Institute came in. Effectively, we created 5 work streams in the project. I was really quickly running you through this. So Inspiring Workplace were all about our environment and changing that. Community, as we call it, was really about how we work on our CSR agenda in the local communities. Leadership is everywhere was about leadership in the business, but trying to instill better leadership behaviours across the business. Taught us to collaborate, which is all about how we teamwork together and communicate. And then this final work stream, which is the one that I sponsored within the business, which is keep it simple. And really that's about trying to improve our systems, our processes, and just really make things all easy to do in the business, make you feel better about doing your job. And one of the drivers of that was when we did our first Great Place to Work survey, that's one of the questions on there in terms of have I got what I need to do my job, and we got a result 57%, which is one of our lowest scores. So this was an area that we felt was ripe to really try and change the business, and we all feel in the business that this needs some attention. Really the aim is, well you can read it for yourselves, but it's to make our jobs easier ultimately. And we created a year one plan, which was something called Process Detox, which was trying to take out all those non-essential reports and admin tasks that we do that just waste time and don't necessarily add a lot of value. And then the two key things next are where the Nimbus program came from. So we identified some key business processes that we needed to work on, our 5-year planning process, our brand planning process, as examples that needed re-engineering, that weren't working effectively. But actually, we didn't really have a lot of focus on business process management whatsoever in the organisation. We needed to try and address that and find out where did that need to go. So that kind of borne out in the project that followed. So we went on a bit of a journey in terms of those last 2 points. So we started with Visio, which is the standard tool that we've been using in the business. We found that incredibly difficult when we started mapping our processes. Not many people have got Visio licenses in the business, so we're having to distribute it via Word. It's quite complex, difficult, and we hadn't really got a repository to put the kind of process anywhere. So quite quickly, we felt this isn't really the route to go. And it was pretty clear that we didn't have the skills in the business to really do it. Fortunately, I've been working with Nimbus for a number of years. I worked with them way back in 2001, 2002 at a previous company. And I felt that the situation we had was right for the kind of solution that Nimbus Control is. So we got in touch with Nimbus and looked at how we could, develop this strategy specifically around business process management, which ended up in what we now call How To, which is the branding within Twinings OVO of the Nimbus Control product. Question mark obviously is around if you don't know how to do something, then you go to How To. It's called How To, as in TWO, because we're known within ABF as Twinings OVO, so play on words. And really, it became a business tool in terms of that project. So that was very different for our business. We'd never done anything like this before in the business. Took a bit of convincing with the main board when I went to see them, to talk to them about this. I guess as a de-risk strategy, we decided to run a pilot, and to minimise the cost, we asked Nimbus to host it for us. So that's how we've kicked off this project. And then we put a project together within Twinings to really look at what's our strategy in this area, how do we roll out this kind of thought process within the organisation, and then develop this business tool rather than just an application that adds some value. We then quickly try to estimate, from a resource point of view, how many diagrams we felt that we needed to put in place. The UK business is only a commercial business unit, so it's not the whole full manufacturing operation unit. And we felt at that time there's about 400, 450 processes. There's actually been a lot more than that, as you often get. But we tried to plan out exactly how those resources were going to be needed over time. Because one of the problems we have is we're a small business in terms of the UK overhead. We don't have a lot of time to be able to put 6 people on the project full time. So it's business as usual as well. So it's trying to plan that process out. And what we found is lots of the processes were in people's heads. We didn't have a lot of this stuff documented, which is why we were struggling at the very start of the project. So you need time to try and drag it out of people's brains when you don't have the documentation. So we knew that it was going to be quite a time-hungry piece of work. So it needed to be planned appropriately. And then something I'm going to focus on quite a lot is around the change management. This is no different to a lot of change management projects for us. I'm not going to focus on all the technical stuff we've done, because Nimbus are the experts in that. They can help any of the kind of clients, I'm sure, or projected clients within the room here. I'm really going to talk about how's this worked for us, how have we really gone about trying to get this thing up and running. I talked about planning, so immediately, we kind of broke it down by function, and we looked at resource plans, and we tried to estimate, right, when are we going to be able to map these processes? And then we tracked it on that basis. So this is an example of our credit control team. Small number of processes, actually, only 30 diagrams we anticipated, and then we tracked through time, and we had a steering group kind of looking at that on a monthly basis. The bulk of the work's all in the mapping process, so we typically handle this in terms of workshops rather than taking existing documents and somebody kind of just trying to convert them to a Nimbus format. Typically, process experts or people from the business that can sit in a room and explore and get to a kind of an end point. That's not as easy as it sounds for some of those who haven't done that. When we started with our PO process, we've got about 5 different ways of raising a purchase order, and it became very complex. So that's actually quite a time-consuming and challenging part of the project, and where we spent virtually all of our effort. In terms of the kind of the project plan, we started, I say, from a restructure point of view back in June 2009, just over 2 years ago, and that really kicked off the whole business transformation. Quite quickly then, after having done the detox, we've gone into this, how do we re-engineer some of these processes? And we chose 2, and as I say, we struggled with them pretty badly to start with. And then within a few weeks of that, we said, right, let's go back to the drawing board and look at this professionally. How, if you step back a moment, how would you try and manage this more effectively? Which went through a process of trying to get to the vision and all that kind of stuff. And then by November, we kind of recognised that this needed a different approach, which is one we called Nimbus. And then through from November to March, we kind of had a few chats about how that would work. And then kind of sorted out the kind of the hosting solution and all that kind of stuff. And that kick-off really for the project proper was in March, where we did the initial training. We picked about 10 people from the business, cross-functionally, to train as what we call our change champions, and become more expert in this area. And I have to say, the purpose of what we did there was not about learning how to use the Nimbus Control tool. It was much more around what's business process management all about. Should we approach this? How do I map, logically? Because we're commercial people, logic doesn't necessarily always follow in the same way as some of the more operational areas. So there was a lot of effort put up front to try to get a certain mindset more than anything else, and then that flowed into the mapping tools. And pretty much straight after that, we started the mapping process, and that carried on up until August 10 when we went live. And I guess the problem you've got here, when we knew that the project was going to last over a year, to get all of the content, there's 400 or 500 diagrams plus. It's really difficult until you can't wait until you've got 500 diagrams a year and a half after the project's launched, because you just run out of steam. You don't get the traction in the business. Equally, if you go too early, you end up having not a lot of content. People don't find it useful. People don't look at it. So it's a very difficult balance to strike there. But we were very busy between March and August with those identified people putting together some of the key business processes that we felt would be useful at launch. Then we went live in August, and then really since then, it's all been about continuing that mapping process, making sure that we've got everything covered, but also then going in and re-engineering some of those things, or actually mapping stuff that we didn't have documented. No one actually even thought about how we should do it. So it's identified a lot of gaps as well. And I guess what we've really done as well is focused on events to keep how to front of mind within the business, because as I said, when you've got a project that's of quite some length, you need to keep the enthusiasm behind that. So very much we focused on the change management angle of this project just as much as the technical angle. Just to give you a bit of kind of what's worked and what's not worked so well. I think what's worked really well is the fact that we're able to deploy the solution really, really quickly. Once we made a decision, we were up and running within a month and a half from scratch. And with minimal investment, which meant that if it didn't really work for us, couldn't convince the board, the other members of the board, that this was something really worth investing by more heavily, that we could get a kind of a quick exit from the whole project, really. As it turned out, it's worked really well, and we're now investing behind it, and we expect that that will be hosted internally within the next few months, actually. With all business change projects, I guess, really critical to get the top-down support. So once we kind of committed behind the project, all the functional heads were really committed, made sure that we got all of the resources we needed within the functions within the business. So that's absolutely critical in terms of setting that direction and expectation of the teams that this is a priority project. We need to focus on it. Prioritization content. Going back to the point about the balance about going live, making sure it's not too far out, but making sure you've got enough content. We were very careful about which content we were focusing on in the short term, and really we made it stuff that was very generic, things that affects everyone. So things like HR processes, things like how do I change the cartridge on the photocopier? Where do I post the letter? How to raise a purchase order. Those are things that virtually everyone in the business does. And certainly for a new starter, isn't necessarily obvious. So we were very generic about the content. So there was something for everyone when we launched. For those of you who've worked with Nimbus, they have a set of kind of standardized business processes, a kind of a template about how a business should run. And let's face it, most things that we do in business, all businesses do the same kind of things. Maybe it's in a slightly different way, but very similar. We found that really invaluable. When we first started some of the workshops and we had a blank sheet of paper, it was incredibly difficult to plan a process from. Whereas if you have something you can critique, you immediately start to change it around and start to build upon it. And we found that a much more useful way of mapping. If you can get something, even if somebody comes and tries to do a bit of a map before we go to a workshop, it at least gives you something to start building upon. And that gives you a much better basis to actually get a better result, and certainly in a lot quicker time. I've already talked about the change champions. I think it's absolutely key that when you've got a big change initiative like this, you have a core team that not only work on the project, but also can support each other and work on the direction that the project's going in. So we've got people that were mapping trained, that could go and help map another person's workshop with their team, maybe act as a facilitator, because I think you need that. You need a facilitator, you need a mapper, and then you've got a workshop. Nimbus is great at being able to capture live, in a workshop, but it needs a bit of resource to kind of manage that process behind it. But having a group of individuals all with the same kind of level of knowledge really, really helped. Then the next kind of 3 points I've got a bit of more information about, because I think this is really key. When you're trying to launch a new initiative, trying to get that traction, trying to get that change. People don't like change, everyone knows that in this room. Trying to really get the tool established as a proper business tool, we felt was probably going to be the biggest challenge, because we could immediately see with some of the kind of successive implementations at Nimbus elsewhere, the technical stuff's going to work okay. It's about making it work for our business and getting the users really engaged, feeling it's going to add some value to them, and kind of making sure that it's sustainable. And yes, they may go and have a look at it in week 1, but do they use it in week 2, 3, 4, etc. So the branding, the how-to logo, and all that kind of stuff that went with that, we felt was really important to get that right up front. And then we spent a lot of time on the pre-launch, making sure that people really understood what this thing was all about, what it was going to offer to them, and making sure that there was a training package available, that before we went live, they'd seen the tool, they'd been taken through it, they understood where the online demos were, they had a little guide to kind of show them what to do. And then after that, to make sure that we keep in touch, to make sure that as we content build, we make people aware. So, but also have things like suggestion boxes and things like on site. So if there's something that they felt was desperately important that hadn't got on there, they could let us know, and then we could maybe reprioritise some of the content build that we were going through. And we've run a number of events to try and stimulate some of that interest again, which I'll kind of give you a bit of an insight into. So very much we focused on that, and I think that was the right thing to do. It's been borne out because the business tool now has got real traction within Twinings. So just to give you a flavour of some of the things we did. Pre-launch, we used to put posters around the building. No one had even seen how to, hadn't got a clue what this thing was about. It was being worked on as a kind of a project, but not in full visibility of the whole business. So people, the inquisitive nature, were thinking, what the hell does this mean? And we went through a few weeks of that, and then we started replacing that with these to let people know something big was going to be coming. So obviously there were a number of people that were working on the project that were talking to their teams, but fundamentally this was sort of our internal marketing campaign to try and get this thing with some real traction in the business. And then we had a big launch. We had a party with how-to balloons and a cake even. One of our team was an avid baker, so it really created some real energy on the day and really got people excited about what this tool's about. And immediately we had a load of hits, as you can imagine. People were kind of, what's this all about? And we obviously trained it on the day, and we had workshops and little rooms that you could go and look at it and get your PC out and start logging on and all that kind of stuff. So it's a massive kind of blitz to start this thing off, because it's quite a big change for the business, and we need everyone involved. We've also done a lot of post-launch to try and re-stimulate that engagement. Because when you've only got maybe 50 or 60 processes live at launch, and you've got another 300 or 400 to go, the reaction could be, well, I'll just forget about it for 6 or 7 months and I'll come back when it's finished. But of course, there's a lot of value that can be done in the meantime. And a lot of the processes, the core processes about how we do our business that are changing and we've been mapping, we want people to follow them. So we want people looking at this tool regularly. So we run a number of events, really around kind of natural events in the normal calendar. So Halloween, Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter egg. We did a hunt there. So with some small prizes. And what we did was we tried to utilize the functionality with how-to. So for instance, the treasure hunt that we did, you had to go through a number of screens, which would have really stretched you around the whole of how-to and different functions like searches and all this kind of stuff to get clues, to get a word, which is the answer that got a prize. So you'd have had to spend at least an hour on how-to achieve that. So it really started getting people engaged. It's amazing, kind of a small bribe, what that can do, really. So we had a lot of people respond. Most of the business took part in these events. So that's great. And just give you a kind of an example of some of the things that we did around some of these events. I've taken the Halloween one, and we actually mapped some processes. So this one is how to basically make a pumpkin for your Halloween night. Very silly, but it demonstrates some of the key things that you can do, like add attachments with different pumpkin designs, to really start to get people using it in a slightly less dry manner, because for most commercial people, process is a bit dry. But this sort of makes it a bit more human for them and starts to get them engaged in a slightly better manner. So that's worked really well. And you can see that on the usage stats from when we first launched. So you can see all the big spikes, and I've kind of really kind of highlighted where those events took place. And we've done some specific things with the team. So there's a big team in the commercial organisation we did some work with there, where there's a big spike. And then we've done a lot of PR when we've released big chunks of content. So that's when we released all of our forms. We wiped them off all of our systems to make sure that there was no other place you could get them from. Make sure that these were specific kind of controlled documents and that no team would receive a form that wasn't off that. So we've tried to be very disciplined in the way that we have gone about that. And again, it's driven compliance straight away. So that's great. What's worked less well? I kind of talked about the challenge when you've got a fairly small team with not necessarily a lot of resources you can put onto the project. with a big agenda, lots of processes in the business still, and most of it all in people's heads, then it's just a massive resource drain. So, you know, it has took us over a year to get all the content together, and I've seen some of the implementations of how Nimbus Control, rather, that, you know, they're getting running in weeks. You know, it hasn't been weeks for us, it's over a year. But we've got there and we've built on it as we've gone. I guess from our point of view, we started really small. This was a UK initiative and a pilot at that. So we didn't really get on the corporate agenda, and so we haven't been able to drag in a whole bunch of resources from IS and all the rest of it. It's been quite a contained project. That's been really good because we've been able to really direct it. But, you know, again, pulling in those resources has been difficult. We had some initial issues with driving compliance. We actually launched this alongside a SharePoint site that we'd redeveloped, which we now call the Hub. And we got to a point where we weren't driving the kind of compliance we liked, so basically we just shut off our network drive, so people couldn't actually use any shared network drive. And we said, right, you use SharePoint, you use How To, those are our tools. So we've kind of done a bit of carrot and we've also done a bit of stick. But we've now got great compliance and people are using it actively, and you can see we've got 200-300 hits a week regularly now, which for, you know, there's probably about 80 people in the business that are going to have access to this because the others are, you know, shop floor. So that's quite a good, considering we're probably 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the way in terms of build all of the content. But I guess we were a bit slower than we would have liked at the very start. And I guess because we had a hosted solution, it means you've got to kind of zip across on a web link to the Nimbus site, which means you've got to then put in another password. And it's amazing how much of a barrier putting in a password in can be. So that's been quite difficult for us and a bit of a barrier. But now the project's really in flow and it's working, and we know that it's a permanent feature in our business moving forward. We have a plan to integrate this into our SharePoint environment in February next year. And that's in the IS plan, and we're now engaging the wider group. Other parts of Twinings are looking to do it as well. So where are we going? So we say we're still building our content. Most of it's there, but we expect it will be fully up to date by December. That's really mapping the as-is. Well, we've got situations where we really don't know what we actually do, and we've got to kind of go back to scratch. We've kind of re-engineered some of that as we've gone, but there are already a number of opportunities to really start to then re-engineer some of the processes. It's a lot easier to be able to do that once you know what you currently do, so then think about how you go to the future. One particular area is the new product development process, which is a really pretty big, gigantic process. So that's one area that we particularly are going to be looking at in the next few months. The timing works really well for us as well because we're about to embark on a new ERP replatforming in January next year. Having all your processes mapped doesn't half make it a lot easier when you're having conversations with an ERP vendor because they just know exactly how you do things. So we've, you know, the whole how-to project came out as keep it simple work stream as we talked about earlier, but actually we always knew that we were going to be doing ERP early 2012, and we saw it as a real enabler to then moving into an ERP, and we expect that we're going to be using Nimbus Control throughout that process in terms of test scripts, and also, I guess, the bottom point, it's moving into the vision we talked about at the start. Our vision is very much that we want to create a one-stop shop for everything you do with your job, no matter what your role. So every process that you'll be involved in will be on your list when you log in based on your user ID, and then every process you're in, be it a manual process, a system process, you can do from one screen. So there's no reason why you can't fire up ERP transactions directly off the how-to process. So our intention is that you basically do your entire job from the how-to tool, effectively, if you need to. Just to finish, there's a short video just to give you a bit more of a flavour that's, as we said earlier, there's a bit of a case study going to be published about us on the web, but this gives you a bit of an insight into some of those things.
We initially looked at the top level of our business with our general managers. Having that top level helped us by focusing on the different areas of the business. We divided it into 5 areas, 4 particular ones which were strategy, marketing, sales and order fulfillment, and also a list of generic processes. We're using How-To to support our change cycle through suggestions, implementing and then notifying of any changes to processes. We implemented SharePoint site at the same time as implementing Nimbus Control. So Nimbus Control, or How-To as we call it, has fitted in very well with that.
Nimbus has improved people's day-to-day activities because if they don't know how to do something, they now have somewhere to go to actually look to find out, rather than having to go around and ask people.
One of the critical success factors has been around ownership of processes, and we've made sure from the beginning that we've had all the relevant people in all of the workshops so that it's very clear who owns the process and who needs to do which task. It's important to create awareness and gain adoption, and how we've done this is by a series of teaser campaigns including Halloween, treasure hunts, quizzes, etc., based around using the tool and any new processes that we have added.
Right, we need to review this here.
Okay, yeah. Is that going to go in here?
Yeah.
As far as new employees are concerned, it's now part of the induction process and they can see how the business is run and where they fit in. We've had some great feedback from both existing and new starters. From the existing employers, it's been around clarity on roles and responsibilities and order processes. As a business, we decided to go for Great Place to Work accreditation, and one of the questions in that is around, do I have the tools and resources to do my job? A year ago, January, had a result of 57%, and when we surveyed this year, we had a result of 77%, so that can show what kind of impact Nimbus Control has had on our business.
For 300 years, Twinings has been at the forefront within the tea industry, and we clearly want to continue to be at the forefront for the future. So I guess in conclusion, we see Nimbus Control as a way of creating a step change in our ways of working as we try and look for new and innovative ways of trying to stay ahead.